importance of for every citizen in Uganda. And I believe that everyone who is joining in should pick a leaf or two and also encourage others to join in and also be a part of this amazing conversation. On Twitter, we are Unwanted Witness. On Facebook, we are Unwanted Witness UG. On YouTube, we are Unwanted Witness Uganda. And on Instagram, we are Unwanted Witness UG as well. LinkedIn, Unwanted Witness. And you can also find us at www.unwantedwitness.org. And the hashtag is hashtag UG Invest in ICT. Yes. So for some background on this conversation, Uganda, as of January 2023, has a total population of 47 point something million, right? But the number of people that are able to access the internet are 11 million. And that leaves 75% of Ugandans unable to access the internet. And while we are advocating for this, most people do not understand the reason behind it. Digital rights are very important, and the conversation today is to ensure that while people invest in ICT, while civil society organizations invest in ICT, are they able to also make sure that other individuals in remote areas are included and they're not left behind? Because access to the internet now more than ever is very, very important. Seeing that social dialogue like we are having right now, education, the right to education, the right to have economic development, everything is centered online these days. And that is all that we're going to be discussing today. To start off this conversation, I'd like to share a poll question with everybody to be able to share with us your opinions, your views, and engage with us, because once we engage in this discussion, then we will be able to understand where we can improve as a nation and also as a country as a whole. I'm seeing people are already engaging. The question is the budget allocation for Uganda's ICT. Is it enough, right? Is the budget allocation of Uganda's ICT sector in past financial years sufficient to drive digital transformation? In your own opinion, do you think this is true? Do you think it's not? Or are you not sure? I will be sharing the poll results later on. Thank you so much for your views. The poll question will remain as we introduce our amazing panelists and speakers who are going to be engaging in this conversation today. We'll leave this poll question for another minute, and then we will announce your results after a while. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for engaging. Okay, let us proceed. So on this call, on this conversation, investing in ICT as an engine for the enjoyment of judicial rights in Uganda, we have panelists from here in Uganda and also from Kenya. We have Grace Githaiga. Thank you so much for joining us, Grace. I can see you on the call as well. Thank you so much for honoring our invite. Yes, so to kickstart this conversation, we have Dorothy Mukasa, who is the Executive Director here at the Unwanted Witness Uganda, a civil society organization that is focused on empowering and protecting the digital freedoms and rights of Ugandans across the country, but also she has dedicated her entire career to making sure that Ugandans' rights are respected and also their freedoms are protected in the digital realm. Thank you so much for joining us, Dorothy.
Thank you, Bella. Good evening, our listeners and fellow panelists. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. On the call as well, we have Michael Ochero. Michael is the Assistant Commissioner at E-Services Ministry of ICT. Michael has worked around monitoring and evaluation and has also been a part of amazing projects at the ministry. And he has also been involved in policy formulation to handle issues of cybersecurity and development of the ICT services ecosystem, and previously served as a principal network administrator and ICT lecturer at Technical College. Thank you so much for joining the call, Michael.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you, listeners and viewers. I wish you a good session.
On the call as well is Lucy Bitete, who has been active in the ICT scene here in Uganda for about 10 years or so. And we are so glad that you have been able to make it. Lucy is currently working through GIZ and the D4D Hub. And this is an initiative by the European Commission and member states to drive inclusive, fair, and rights-based digital transformation. She manages the IDEA project, which aims at strengthening the role of civil society organizations and academia in digital transformation across Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So also on the call, we have Grace Gitaga all the way from Kenya. Karibuni. Karibuni, Grace. Thank you so much for joining us. Grace is the CEO and convener at the Kenya ICT Action Network in Kenya. She also hosts a show on the Kenya's public broadcaster, the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, a show called Tech on Take. She makes sure that conversations around ICT are watered down for the normal Kenyan citizen to actually understand. She is a respected advocate for public interest in ICT policy, digital rights, and broader human rights as well. She has also conducted research and training in digital rights, human rights, online, etc. Thank you so much for joining us.
Asante sana.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Martin Gordon Murangizi. He is from UN Global Pulse, Kampala. This is an organization or an initiative that envisions a world where responsible, inclusive, digital innovation advances sustainable development, and more so to protect the planet. So before joining the UN Global Pulse, Dr. Murangizi worked in academia, teaching and conducting research at several universities in Uganda for almost a decade. He is the lead researcher there, and he is also the officer in charge. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Martin.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I will now, so for those who haven't actually seen the poll, we have been sharing our insights, and most of these are around this conversation that is asking, is the budget allocation for Uganda's ICT sector in past financial years sufficient to drive digital transformation? And a number of us have said no, and the rest are not sure. The others are saying yes, right? So this is the results that we have gotten from all of us who have been able to answer. Those are 13 people. We will be using this for informing this conversation and, of course, listening to what our speakers have to say in this regard. But of course, Uganda's ICT sector has grown in past years, and we will not derive away from that fact, but also there's a lot of loopholes that we want to be able to address and see where this conversation is going to go and how we are better yet able to engage citizens and also connect people in remote areas and so on and so forth. So I have an icebreaker question for our panelists as well. It's the same question, but more in your regard. And we have 4 minutes each to answer, as we also introduce ourselves further to the audience. What is your assessment of the investment in Uganda's ICT sector? And in your opinion, is this enough? Are we doing enough? And do you think that this is gearing towards the development and the enjoyment of digital rights in Uganda? I'll start with Dr. Martin Gordon Mobangizi, who will usher in others to answer the question.
Thank you, Bella, for the question. So I think Uganda has shown proactive commitment in enhancing and investing in ICT for its socio-economic development. And I do think it has taken also some steps to ensure that citizens enjoy rights with notable initiatives by the ministry, led by the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, but also with its affiliated departments. I know some may argue, and as you can see from the poll, that more needs to be done, but we also need to appreciate some of the important milestones. For example, on enjoyment of digital rights, the right to privacy, I would say the establishment of the Personal Data Protection Office is a good thing. And we know that this office is responsible for overseeing the implementation and enforcement of the Data Protection Act 2019. But we've also Uganda also has a national information security policy, which also focuses on the enjoyment of digital rights, and that is the right to online security. So I think these policies, strategies, or structures put by government provide a framework to create an enabling environment in which other players can actually operate. Other players like the private sector, academia, but also the civil society. And the challenge is sometimes that citizens may not interact with these instruments developed by the government of Uganda, and therefore there is no appreciation of what of government's plan, but also visions on ICT, and therefore they do not have any way of holding the government accountable, I would say. Recently, I had to renew my driving permit, but it took less than 30 minutes. And, this is like the impact on, I would say, impact on development, because it would take, days, but now it takes less than 30 minutes. And this is because the systems at NERA are maybe now integrated with the driving permit system. And so they're able to actually do the renewal quickly. And I know that someday the passport, system will also be as efficient as this. And this basically saves on citizens' time. So for me, that's how I look at it. But I think there is more to be done. But I also appreciate where Uganda has come to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I think we'll listen from Michael Ochero.
Thank you, Bella. Yeah, as already Martin has mentioned, the enabling environment for enjoyment of digital rights, which has been created by not only developing, putting in place the personal data protection law, but all the relevant laws, the cyber laws, you have the cybersecurity laws, you have the ICT policy, plus several other instruments have been put in place to ensure the enjoyment of digital rights. Presently, if you look at the ICT sector in Uganda, it is growing. Presently, the current growth registered has been about 19% in the last year or so. We stand at contributing to our revenue at about 2 Uganda shillings, 2.2 trillion. And also you have indicators like the World Bank Maturity Index, which indicates our ICT sector has moved from Group B to Group A, specifically in areas of core government systems, service delivery, and citizen engagement. In terms of digital literacy, you have government equipping up to 1,150 labs to develop ICT skills. You have SMEs have been trained. The numbers go up to about 10,000 recently in the use of ICT for business. So there has been a lot of growth in our sector, and I think we should commend. They come from government. I think everybody should commend government for the progress thus far and for what is being planned long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Now we'll listen from the women. And of course, we'll start with Dorothy Mkasa to tell us what your assessment is of Uganda's investment in ICT so far, and if that is leading towards digital rights enjoyment.
Thank you, Bella. And like previous speakers have mentioned, I'll not repeat what they've said. Some of them have provided facts, which is really true to the position. But I want us to appreciate, give a little context and hope our viewers and listeners appreciate that digital transformation, rather digital investment in ICT is really critical. Yeah? And at Unwanted Witness, we've always told people that we should advocate for the fact that ICT is added to the traditional factors of development, like they already know, things like water, electricity, roads, but we also know that ICT really enables these factors of production. So that's how much importance should be attached to ICT as a sector. And therefore the development and the investment should be geared towards making it even more enabling, more stronger and more supportive for enjoyment of digital rights. Yes, I agree that Uganda has made strides. I mean, we are not where we were as a country. We have strategic documents that speak to governments. Direct investment in ICT. For example, we have Vision 2040, which speaks to ICT as an engine of development. So that's big on its own, viewing ICT at that level. But we also have, the digital, the National Development Plan 3, which again, chapter 14, which speaks to digital transformation. All these are good initiatives. The initiatives that have been mentioned by both Michael and the Commission as well, but also have government has put in place innovation hubs like the one in Nakawa, the e-governance services. Michael has given testimony to the e-services, So all these are good initiatives, but like they've said, they are not enough. Are we where we're supposed to be? Definitely, I would say more needs to be done. We are not where we are supposed to be as a country, because as all these good initiatives are being put in place by government, the actions and also laws that speak otherwise. And for us who are on this side of the spectrum, we ask ourselves whether, all the previous initiatives are really, being watered down, or there's an intention to, unknown intention that leads to suffocation of ICT. So the investment, for instance, in this coming financial year, you realize that there's been a 0.34% allocation of budget allocation to ICT. Slightly changed from the 0.26 of the current financial year ending. Okay, all these, the documents that I've mentioned before should speak to the actual investment in the ICT. What we've done is not enough, like everybody else agrees, but we need to do more, and this should be deliberate. If we want to have more, more people enjoy their digital rights, we need to deliberately invest in ICT. But there are also issues around the adoption of retrogressive digital tax regimes. These downplay the fact that ICT is an engine for development, but also issues of adoption of surveillance laws. Happy we have the data protection law, but then there are laws that enable surveillance. You see the contradiction that really impedes on the enjoyment of digital rights. The digital divide is huge. You've just mentioned you have 11. This goes back to investment. How much do we invest to get results? So only 11 million Ugandans are online, but also issues of meaningful access. Everybody, the 11 million people access, but then the meaningful access is a question that can be debated until cows come home. Calls dropping, data bundles being eaten by crocodiles, that saying, Ugandan saying, the digital illiteracy issues. These are all issues that affect the intention, the investment intentions that government has shown. Government is also known for cutting down, disrupting internet shutdowns. We know Facebook is illegally accessed. All this, if we're talking investment, it should be holistic. What are our practices? What are our laws? How much money do we put in? All these contribute to that enabling environment for both development and also digital rights. For instance, no investor would want to come and invest in Uganda where internet is shut down, given the fact that we are considering ICT as a factor of production. Also these actions really downplay the good intentions that government is really having, and also the insufficient investment in innovation. We need to innovate. Government needs to invest in innovation. So all these gaps, I think, are important for us to speak about, and also build on what has already been done by government and other actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Now we'll listen from Lucy and then Grace. What is your assessment of Uganda's ICT investment so far?
Great, thank you. A lot has already been said by the other speakers. So what I wanted to do is to actually mention some of the outcomes of some workshops that we organized under the IDEA D4D Hub project recently. The IDEA D4D Hub project is a project under the D4D Hub. The D4D Hub is a coordinating mechanism where the EU member states came together and said, let us coordinate more how we do digital transformation in partner countries so that we have less duplication, we have more impact, and we also coordinate our priorities. So under this secretariat, there are a couple of projects that are active. The IDEA D4D Hub project is one of them, and it's particularly exciting because it's focusing on civil society and academia's role in the digital transformation, which is not really the stakeholder groups that are most commonly considered, yet they are really, really important to, speak for the voices of those that are maybe not always have those strong voices. They actually have that connection with the people on the ground, the users, the citizens, and the civil society also, has the ability to hold government and private sector accountable. So under the IDEA project, we had a couple of activities in Uganda recently. This is a Team Europe project, which means we implemented together as GIZ and ABEL, Expertise France, which is the French agency, and other agencies. And we had workshops in 4 different regions in Uganda: Karamoja, Kigezi, Albertine region, and Rwenzori. Now, in these workshops, we had CSOs come together and talk about what are the challenges for them. And I want to contrast a bit to all the positive steps that have been mentioned, because these what we often don't remember is that when you live in Kampala, you are really privileged in terms of access to ICT infrastructure. But as soon as you move out of Kampala, the reality is really very, very different. And actually, the topic of access, it was actually a topic that came up across the regions as one of the most important topics. First of all, actually access to devices as well. Not only the access to the right devices, but also the cost of the device, but also the skill of knowing which device and how to actually operate it. That was a big challenge. Of course, we heard things like network, accessibility to the mobile network, but also access to power, because if you don't have power, you can't power your devices. And of course, also the cost of data, which was also mentioned. So I just wanted to mention that these are really still really very, very big concerns, especially in the regions that we have to consider. Uganda is a big country with a lot of territory to cover, and also a lot of population that lives in these regions. So this was some of the outcome. And we actually had even, there are very many reasons why, and I think we are going to get to that later on, why this access is so important. But we even had, for example, in Karamoja, very interestingly, they mentioned that access to the internet and access to devices was extremely important for their security. So in addition to, all the other benefits, there's also a really important benefit of security that was mentioned there. So I will stop there for now, and I think we are going to touch upon some of these things further later on.
Thank you, Lucy. We'll go to Grace. Grace, in comparison to what you've been able to achieve in Kenya, what is your assessment or close assessment to what you think the ICT sector in Uganda has been able to do towards investment and digital rights?
Thank you so much, even for this opportunity to speak in this webinar. I don't know if I am placed in a very good situation to respond to that, but I when I was thinking about the question as this morning, at one point I thought maybe it would be unfair to compare Kenya and Uganda, because when you look at the demography, Kenya and where Kenya is placed. So I think to be fair, maybe Kenya has benefits in terms of the geographical placement, in terms of the political situation. Here, at least, there's that, we actually consider ourselves as enjoying a relatively freedom of expression. And then when you also compare where we are placed, we have the Indian Ocean, we have the ports. When you compare that to Uganda, which is a landlocked country, I think for economic reasons, then you may not place Uganda at the same place. When you look at Kenya's population, we are now at 53 million, and I think Uganda is it 46 million? So when you also compare the annual income per capita, you compare between Kenya and Uganda. I think because of the situation and the factors that favor Kenya, then you find that Kenya, is way ahead. When you look at the statistics, for example, in terms of the mobile penetration. So you see that in Kenya right now they're saying we're at 117% mobile connection, simply meaning that each individual is able, or different individuals are able to own multiple devices. It actually does not mean that everyone in Kenya has access to a phone. So Kenya, still has a large population that is still unconnected, both to cellular network and even to the internet. So many places are on 2G, but in the cities, yes, you find we are already, like in Nairobi, already on 5G. But again, that's why I'm saying probably before we compare in terms of investment, we need to look at what factors are contributing to the level of investment and what are the current issues that favor that current investment. So when you look at Kenya's ICT sector, it's actually estimated to contribute to 7% of our country's GDP through ICT-enabled services. And I guess that way, Kenya then is seen as the regional ICT hub in terms of investment in ICTs in infrastructure. For example, we are deemed as a leader in broadband connectivity, in general ICT infrastructure, in added value services, in mobile money, and even in mobile banking and fintech. So again, what also may favor us as opposed to Uganda is that when it comes to the cost of internet, you find that Kenya has now 6 undersea fiber optic cables that all terminate in Mombasa. And these are the primary drivers of fixed internet penetration in the country, making it one of the highest, fastest, and most dependable in the region. And of course, what this means is that it makes the cost of international transit much cheaper because we buy it in bulk from the source. Unlike Uganda, where you have to buy and the cost of importing even the internet from the neighboring countries, that has to be pushed on to the user. So for us, the cost of that transit of the data has to be passed on to the end user, I guess, and makes internet more accessible. When I talk about also in terms of the leadership, and again, I must say that we have a leadership that, not the entire leadership, just like like in the ICT, So we are guided by a national internet strategy that aims to convert us into a Kenya knowledge and provide that high quality services for the internet. And I want to stop there.
Thank you, Grace. When you talk about the cost of the internet, you have every Ugandan there. It's really high, and it's close to $2, and that's a very, very expensive to buy 1 GB here in the country. But I think it's also because there's very less competition happening just between two competitors. So that's also something that we can talk about later. But this first question, I think, will go to Michael, just to shed more light on the statistics we gave earlier of internet penetration here in Uganda. We have 24.6% internet penetration compared to Kenya. Kenya has 32%, Rwanda has 30%, Tanzania has 31%, and we're a bit low on internet penetration. And just to ask, one of the founding members of the East African communities, which is very, very unlikely, but just to ask, can you give us a brief overview of Uganda's ICT investments or initiatives thus far, and what is making us lag behind in terms of digital inclusion for each and every Ugandan? And is it a problem to do with policies and frameworks, or is it to do with implementation?
Yeah, thank you, Bella. Well, first of all, if I could start on some of the ways we are addressing the challenges that we have. I'll start with the government's intervention in lowering the cost of the internet. And one of the major recent interventions has been governments engaging in the development of the infrastructure that runs the internet. Government went into laying fiber across the country so as to reduce the cost of broadband. Presently, government owns up to about 5,000 kilometers of fiber. Now, the private sector owns about 8,000 kilometers. So government has invested and is growing in order to reduce the cost of infrastructure rollout and definitely the cost of the internet. Presently, our government has connected up to 1,500 government institutions to the government fiber so as to reduce the cost of service delivery, service provision by government. Those institutions include schools, include hospitals, as well as local government offices across the country. In addition, the government has established alternate routes. As presented earlier, we are a landlocked country, which raises challenges of access to the sea cables. Presently, government of Uganda has established alternate routes to the sea cables through the border points of Mutukula, Katuna, Busia, and Malaba. And we are developing other routes so as to reduce the disadvantage of being landlocked. Furthermore, there are challenges of service provision, of the rollout of e-services across the country. We recently engaged in the process of innovation, import substitution of imported applications under the innovation program. And right now you have several government systems that are locally developed. You have the e-government procurement system. You have the systems in education, EMIS. You have the e-health management system. You have the business registration system, all developed now by Ugandans. Definitely that reduces the cost of service provision. It leaves the jobs here in the country. And basically it improves the digitalization environment in the country. The other challenge we have experienced is support to these systems across the country in the local governments, the various districts. So what we are doing now is institutionalizing the ICT function across the country in local governments, establishing ICT departments that not only serve that local government, but guide the whole district. Therefore, we support the e-learning systems, we support the e-health systems, we support service delivery across the country. The current focus areas, of course, are reducing the cost of connectivity. We want to ensure in the next 3 years, that is going to be one of the focus areas, issues of skills, digital skills. We've set up several centers of excellence for innovation across the country. We recently set up the Government Innovation Hub that has now expanded. It's being expanded to regional universities, all the regions in the country, establishing government innovation hubs so that we can develop our skills, our digital skills. The there have been challenges of cybercrime. Cybercrime in our financial transactions, and well, government is curbing that through enforcement of and improvement, upgrade of our legal regime, our cyber legal regime, as well as enforcement of those regulations. Cybercrime being borderless, we are going into cooperation with the countries, the globe, the worldwide cyber community. You cannot shy away from cooperation when it comes to cybercrime, because the criminals might be in Europe, but the crime could be committed here in our country. I will stop at that for now, but those are some of the interventions being undertaken. Thank you.
Hope I'm still audible. It's starting to rain here. I hope everyone is able to hear me. We have a Q&A section on your screen. In case you have any questions for the panelists, please note them down over there, and we will be able to hand them over to be answered. But Michael, I'll just ask one more question, just to follow up on this conversation, and you could give 1 to 2 minutes to explain. That National Development Plan recognizes ICT as a fulcrum for development, and yet the budget allocation for ICT is really low. I mean, Kenya is investing $132 million US. Rwanda is investing $38 million US, and as a country, we're investing $33 million, which is quite less ending this financial year. So, in that regard, what are the main challenges or limitations that you are facing at the Ministry of ICT in Uganda due to low budget allocation, and how are you working in order to address these challenges? Just in a minute or two.
Thank you, Bella. Yeah, budget allocation has been a challenge, not only in the ICT sector, but in the health sector, in the education sector, across the country. The baskets, the draw on the national budget are numerous. However, at the Ministry of ICT, yes, recently we benefited quite immensely due to funding of the innovation program. And I must say that has realized tremendous results. As I mentioned earlier, previously imported systems, applications are now being developed locally. That is a tremendous saving. We have done a lot of import substitution, and definitely that is progress that shows that once you invest more in the ICT sector, you therefore reap a lot of benefits. And we, along with the public sector, private sector, we continue to lobby for more investment in ICT. Of course, given the constraints across the country, you have to invest in health, you have to invest in education, you have to invest in roads. We now have to invest in public transport. So, but in ICT, we're also looking at partnering public, private partnerships to develop some of these, the infrastructure, the services. The innovation program presently is also, there's a lot of partnership with the private sector. In the telecom sector, as I mentioned, the infrastructure has largely been laid by the private sector. So we cannot shy from engaging and partnering with the private sector as we improve the level of investment in ICT.
Thank you, Michael. Like I mentioned earlier, it's raining here heavily. I don't know about you, but it's very heavy. But I've disabled my video to be able to cater for my audio, so I'll be able to hear. This question will go to Lucy. Lucy, if you're still on the call. So how can civil society organizations ensure that government uses the funds that they receive from donors and international organizations for ICT development effectively, and also hold them accountable for it? What are those practical and smart interventions that the likes of GIZ and other organizations can do to ensure that their money does not go to us, they hand it over to the government or Ministry of ICT to do certain initiatives towards investing in it?
Well, I didn't get the end of the question, but hello? I hope you can hear me. Yeah, great. Yes, what can civil society do? Of course, like I mentioned before, civil society is extremely important in the whole equation, not only because they are actually the users, the end users, but also because they often don't have a very strong voice in the whole, process of maybe setting up the budgets and policies and all that. So the civil society brings, the voices of these people together and is able to sort of amplify them, and also, tailor them and making sure that they have the right messages, and also that they reach the right people. And also I think civil society has an extremely important role in ensuring that this ICT investment that is being made is actually what we call human-centric. So what we mean by that is that it should be the needs and the rights of the human being in the center of this process. This is a very, very important principle also that is, promoted by the European Union and also the D4D hub. Basically, it should be every development in a digital transformation sense should be in the best interest of the human being, of the citizen, of the user, and not necessarily, driven by other interests such as profit. And here, of course, I'm talking about, the big techs, or other intentions, for example, by government. We mentioned, for example, surveillance and these kind of things. So ensuring that this really happens in a human-centric way is a very, very key role of civil society. And when you asked about, practical examples of how civil society can do that, I think number one, they can they have a really important role in raising the awareness of their communities. I think it was mentioned before that a lot of these communities are not so aware of their rights. I think we are all aware of, these sort of frauds that are happening where people are calling and asking for PIN numbers and so on. I mean, this cannot be protected by any law or regulation, but it's actually about raising awareness in the individuals that they should not give away this information in this way, right? So civil society plays a huge role in building this awareness, promoting digital rights to the citizen, telling them how should they behave. This has a huge impact on data protection, on cybersecurity, all these aspects, but also on e-services. What e-services should they demand from the government, and what should the quality of these e-services be, and also how is the inclusion of these e-services? Is it fair to have somebody pay a very high amount to renew their national ID cards, for example, and so on. So here again, civil society can play an important role. But also another example I can draw on here is from another D4D Hub project that we have in Uganda, where we are working with the public procurement agency, the PPDA. But GIZ has also done similar efforts, both in Kenya with the Office of the Auditor General, but also in Uganda with the Office of the Auditor General, where civil society organizations are given a role in monitoring public expenditure. So they have signed an MOU with, I think, 14 CSOs that operate in the regions, because PPDA only has 3 regional offices. So their reach is very limited. So to compensate for that, they have these CSOs, and their role is to monitor different government projects like a school. And then they have monitors that are trained, and then they enter information about this project in a digital system that was also locally developed. And then they try to actually resolve this locally first. But of course, if there is no solution, it is then, escalated to the PPDA. So for this is happening. This is happening both in terms of procurement, but also in terms of what we call citizen audits, which is also a new sort of methodology that offices of the Auditor General are now putting in place. And here, it's very important to build trust between the government and the civil society organizations. In the case of the PPDA, this took actually many years until they were able to really trust each other. But having sort of MOUs or contracts signed and giving them a formal role in the process, it really helps. And it also gives them, a much stronger position in the society. And at the same time, they can fill the gaps where maybe government's lacking the resources or the reach to get there. So I think these are just some of the activities or examples I can mention. Back to you, Bella. I think maybe the rain has affected Bella's connection. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. It's the rain. The connection is very, very terrible. But thank you so much for that submission. I will get back to you on how further civil society organizations and private sector can work together with government, making sure that data collected or information collected from individuals is protected, and also making sure that individuals are protected when it comes to investing in ICT. How are we able to work together and be able to protect digital rights as well, investing in the sector. So I'll follow up with Martin. Martin, how can the data collected by the government and this data being used, how can it be used or leveraged to maximize the impact on investing in ICT in order to ensure social economic growth and the benefits that other segments in Uganda's population leverage on?
Thank you, Bella. It's also raining here, but I hope I'm loud and clear. So thanks for the question. So you're asking in what ways government can leverage the personal data it collects to optimize the influence of ICT investments on socio-economic progress, but also enhance the well-being of all sectors in Uganda's population. So thanks for the question. So there is a lot of data that government collects as citizens basically interact with digital systems that the government has put in place, as they register for national IDs, as they register for NINs, as they process their passports, driving permits, as they register their companies, marriages, Yeah, so there's a lot of data being collected by government, and I believe this can be leveraged to maximize the impact of ICT investments on the socio-economic development of Uganda. So the idea would be that Uganda must proactively undertake a task of establishing a clear vision and a comprehensive plan to effectively govern, but also securely leverage data. And what other countries are doing, basically they are developing national data strategies to help them be able to undertake that. And I'm happy to say that the Ministry of ICT is also currently leading on this, in helping Uganda come up with a national data strategy. And therefore, Uganda will join other 15 countries worldwide that have been able to develop their national data strategies in the past 5 years. So it's kind of a global trend that countries around the world are developing national data strategies, but also the African Union last year published an African Union data policy framework, which also will help member countries embark on this. So with the national data strategy in place, it will ensure a well-coordinated mechanism for responsible analysis, sharing, and reuse of data within and between government and private sector. So we also need to know it's also a fact that there's a lot of data being collected in private sector that would actually help government decisions in decision making, planning, and investment. But also, likewise, the data that is in government could also support the private sector. So I believe that this would bring about data-driven budget prioritization, and this would ensure that resources are allocated to areas that need them most. And so it could actually bring out a clear picture that the ICT sector needs more money, and more money would then be provided for the ICT sector, but also it will support evidence-based policy making. So policy makers will make informed decisions and develop targeted policies that address specific needs of the different segments of the population. And this could be in the various, programs. So, for example, for the National Development Plan, and allow resources to be allocated effectively, but also addressing disparities. But also borrowing from private sector that has actually used, particularly banks and telecoms that have leveraged data to create innovative service offerings, but also enhanced customer experience. Government can also be able to adopt this best practice by utilizing personal data to customize and enhance the delivery of public services. I think then the other interesting thing would be around data-driven entrepreneurship and innovation. So if there is a way of balancing privacy and security to facilitate access of this data would actually be useful to fuel entrepreneurship and innovation. And this would, enable researchers, startups, and other developers to actually utilize anonymized data or even aggregated data to come up with novel digital solutions and services that would tackle societal issues. So it's I think it would be very important for Uganda to have this national data strategy to ensure that it has a clear vision and plan on how to maximize data. But also, I believe this would also inform the investment it needs to make in the ICT sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. You talked of data strategies, but besides data strategies, besides money being invested in the ICT sector, do you actually think it is possible for the investment in ICT, or that, do you think it's even possible for that data to be used in investing in ICT? Or do you think that data is used for other business? If it is possible, how best do you think government, giving examples, should invest in ICT using this data?
So my thinking is that I mean, we have been in workshops leading to the work around the national data strategy, and the National Planning Authority, for example, will tell you it struggles when it's making plans for the country. I mean, we saw Uganda Bureau of Statistics struggle during the COVID-19 pandemic, without data. So for me, and of course, data in the private sector has actually helped them, like I've said, come up with innovative products and services. I mean, when you look at mobile money, it's based on data, it's powered by data, and without data, you would not have mobile money. So for me, I think the data that the government collects is very, very useful, and it could actually inform. One could do, a study to make a case, an investment case in ICT, but all this needs data. If you don't have data, then it's very difficult to even try to convince government to put some funding on ICT. So that's my thinking. That it's if and also it also goes back to the data culture. So how do Ugandans, all people holding offices, policymakers, think about data? How do they manage data, and how do they utilize the little data they already have? Because if they have a positive data culture, if they will care about the accuracy of the data they have, they will make sure that it's managed well. They'll make sure that it's kept well and secure, and it can actually they will also utilize it, but also ensure that it can be shared with other ministries, departments, and agencies that may actually need it. So for me, I think it is important to ensure that that data is actually used and decisions are made based on evidence, other than planning without the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you so much. The next question is to Grace. Grace, besides all these points that we've mentioned earlier, the shortfalls that Uganda has being a landlocked country, we see that according to research, Kenya's internet penetration is 8.1% more than Uganda's. And what is Kenya doing that Uganda should borrow and live? We mentioned earlier that our 1 GB is close to $2 US. What is Kenya doing, in your experience, what lessons can Uganda draw from Kenya, its investment in ICT, and also in terms of infrastructure and policies as well?
Thank you so much. And like you're saying, Uganda is raining. Here it is so hot. I am just struggling to keep cool. So when you see me shiny, it's because it feels very sweaty. So yeah, what can Kenya do that Uganda can borrow? One, I think it's in terms of policies. Like I mentioned earlier, the country, we have a national internet strategy document that aims to convert Kenya into that knowledge, into a knowledge-based economy by providing that high quality internet services to all the citizens. And then, of course, we also now have a digital economy blueprint, which is a framework that's meant to improve Kenya's ability to leapfrog economic growth in the region. But having said that, and I think also one of our advantages, the fact that Kenya is one of the leaders in driving financial inclusion through the use of digital finance solutions, such as M-Pesa and other digital borrowing platforms. So adoption of such innovations, of course, is facilitating transactions and spurring trade for corporations, for small businesses, enterprises, and even for citizens. But in terms of policies, one of the things that Kenya has done and has done well is embraced multi-stakeholderism. This is, bringing people together to discuss an issue that affects them and come up with ways that it can be dealt with. Of course, I'm not saying that it's been all perfect and rosy, but Kenyans have always advocated for affordable, meaningful broadband connectivity. So we have, such think tanks like Kictanet, the network that I convene, and all the policy documents that the government has come up with before they are finalized. They're subjected to stakeholder engagement, and in that, those documents actually continue to define the quality, the cost of internet that should be provided to the population. And so, like I mentioned about the strategy, we have an ICT master plan, we have an ICT policy, all these documents, then we've seen multi-stakeholderism in coming up and in finalizing with all this, so that then you ensure that people's voices are reflected. I think also, through that, we've been able to push, organizing even companies like Safaricom to actually lower or come up with different strategies of how people handle, data. Because like Safaricom had used to have a policy that, your data would, your data bundles had a time limit. And so we took them on, and we actually said, if I travel and I have a car there with petrol and I go, to the neighboring country for 2 weeks, when I come back, that petrol is still there. So why should they do that? So through that engagement of multi-stakeholderism, then, we've seen a lot of differences. We have two regulators that define the cost of services. So we have the Competition Authority, and we also have the Communications Authority, the sector, who is a sector regulator. And then within that, we now also have the Universal Service Fund, which ensures that, supports communication infrastructure in places that would not make economic sense to the companies. And so it is now a law that all operators must contribute around 0.5% of their annual income to the USF fund. And that way, then that is, the regulator does bidding and calls out for companies interested in putting infrastructure in those unreached markets. So through advocacy, of different stakeholders, we've managed to have public participation now as one of the requirements and at the heart of all policy-making debates. And what has also happened is that when the 2010 Kenya's constitution came into force, because it also allowed public participation, we also now have a requirement in the constitution to have public participation for anyone coming up with policy. And so companies or even government, when they come up with an ICT policy that is not subjected to stakeholder engagement, then they stand a very high chance of actually being slapped with litigation. And to avoid that, because litigation is long, is tedious, it delays a lot of things that everyone is trying to avoid. And so this ensures that then the public also has a voice in some of these policies that are coming up. Again, in terms of infrastructure, we have policies on infrastructure sharing, where operators are required to share their infrastructure, including fiber and mobile telephony masts. And what this means is that the cost of building new masts then goes down, and the benefit, because then the providers have not used so much money, the benefit is passed on to the user, and we are able to have that affordable. Actually, it's called, I want to put the word relative, but it is said that it's affordable. Then in terms of, again, infrastructure, the country has a national fiber optic cable, it's called NOFB, and it's managed by the government. And this is spread in nearly all the counties in Kenya. So that cable is leased to operators, commercial operators, at a reasonable cost that ensures there's then internet connection in practically all locations, even though speed may not be the best, but at least there's some sort of connection, even if it's just 2G. So, however, I must say that it's not all rosy, because we are yet to pass the critical infrastructure bill. This bill envisages that the infrastructure will be safeguarded from vandalism, because that has been an issue here, where we have beautiful stuff installed, and then tomorrow you come, it's all been vandalized. So the bill proposes to designate and classify infrastructure depending on how critical it is for nation building. And what this means is that it will ensure the fiber ducts are constructed in all roads, so that each operator does not have to dig roads to pass the cables. What has been happening is that you find when one operator wants to come to an area, they come and dig to put their cables. They cover them. Then another provider wants to bring theirs, they come and dig again. And so you find that Kenyans sometimes in some areas have consistently to live through, those trenches every time being dug by different providers. And so if then these ducts are going to be covered in the infrastructure bill, it will mean that there's going to be some savings on the capital, and those savings we expect will be passed on to the users. So the bill is meant, once passed, of course, will ensure that cost of access to where live is reasonable and is controlled at least by, say, one entity, unlike the case now where each county, each operator puts, especially the county governments have put prohibitive where live costs for operators to provide internet access to the masses, and yet the internet providers also have to pay to the national government a different levy. So also, I guess finally, it's there are other enabling policies. that revolve around taxation of devices, infrastructure services. However, that has been the situation. We now have a new government, and we don't know what the situation is going to be, because this new government has demonstrated a very high appetite for taxes. And so we are waiting to see whether they are going to be also punitive taxes on devices and on ICT services. But of course, what this means is that if there is going to be high taxation, then the services are automatically going to reduce the number of the population that can consume ICT services. And I want to stop there.
Thank you so much, Grace. I think my biggest takeaway is all policies are subjected to, stakeholders reviewing and giving their feedback. My next panelist is going to be Dorothy, but before we do that, please ask any questions in the Q&A box that is right on your screen. In case you have any questions, please make sure that you put the question in there, and we'll be able to ask the panelists later on. But we also have another poll question, and this second poll question is about the barriers, right? So what factor do you believe is the biggest barrier to internet penetration in Uganda? I have shared the poll with you, and in case you are looking at it, you can go ahead and vote. Which factor do you believe is the biggest barrier to internet penetration in Uganda? Is it inadequate infrastructure? Is it high cost of internet services? Is it limited digital literacy skills? Is it insufficient access to electricity, slow internet speeds, or security and privacy concerns? What could be the biggest barrier? We can take a minute to answer that, and we'll be sharing the results with you soon. So let's proceed to Dorothy. Dorothy, having been the executive director here at the Unwanted Business, and given your organization's work in bridging the digital divide in Uganda and making sure that each person accesses the internet, but also is respected and also their freedoms are heard and protected online, what areas of the ICT sector do you think or see as most critical and in need of investment in order to ensure that digital rights are enjoyed by all citizens across the country?
Thank you so much, Bella, and to all the panelists who have spoken before me. Sorry to Grace for the hit. I have to struggle with compete with the rain. So in case you're not hearing me, please notify me, because I'm really going to struggle compete with the rain. Some of the things have been mentioned by previous speakers, but I'll add as areas of solutions, what needs to be done, and what finally I'll conclude with what we've done as an unwanted witness. I think number one, I think it's important to have a master plan. This Grace mentioned Kenyan case that directly provides investment and attracts talent, because in any field, in any sector, we need talent, but talent can be attracted by the level of investment. So, and we must have a master plan that speaks to that kind of investment. And on top of what Grace has provided for Kenya, I want to give an example of Malaysia. For instance, Malaysia it is the digital community plan, master plan, that saw Malaysia grow its digital economy to up to 17% of total GDP in only 3 years. We may think this is far away from Uganda, but we can also do it with deliberate efforts, geared towards investment. Secondly, I think we need new innovations that enable low cost. The Commissioner Michael mentioned the Ugandans who are doing great work, innovative work. It's a plus. Perhaps we need to do more to ensure that solutions are provided to lower the costs. Like he said, they are now lowering costs on these innovations, but also need to provide incentives for these innovators. Sometimes when we think about incentives, we think they only apply to foreign investors. We need to provide incentives to our local innovators. But Grace also mentioned policies, which I think it's important. We need to have necessary policies that can lower barriers of digital transformation and enjoyment of rights. This is very, very important. In my first submission, I talked about the different legal impediments to enjoyment of rights and also investment. We need to review some of those policies, but also develop new ones that can really get rid of the barriers. We don't need a double taxation on data. We don't need double taxation on mobile money. These are ICT tools that are being used by the common person in this country, the poorest of the poor. Why can't we support them? But also in that way, also supporting more innovation in the ICT sector. So we need to consider barriers that really barriers to digital transformation. We also need innovative business models that can generate more benefits for users and also provide users with skills to use the benefits from the smartphones. Lucy talked about her experience in Karamoja, but it's also a general experience everywhere. We've experienced this throughout our work. The barriers, the skills are really big barriers, and the cost of the gadgets. I think embracing all these solutions requires cross-sector partnerships. Grace talks about participation. We need strong partnerships in embracing all these solutions, and also new thinking. It's not business as usual. We believe that these solutions can directly translate into higher availability, accessibility, and affordability of ICT services. And that's what we need as a country. And also to compete at a global level, that's what we need. But we need to have everybody on board. So as I conclude, what have we been doing as Unwanted Witness in line to our work in ICT, in the ICT sector? For over the years, we've been involved in policy making and reform processes. We've been part of the data protection enactment of the data protection law since 2015. We've walked that journey until to date, where we are now looking at compliance and ensuring that there's awareness to this law, and also there's enforcement when it comes to enjoyment of people's right to privacy. But also have a program on digital inclusion and innovation, where we've been providing and continue to provide skills. Like you said, skills are very, very much needed. And there's certain categories of groups that are really more vulnerable than others. For example, we have persons with disabilities, women, we know that how a pandemic online violence against women is, and we provide these skills, but we also provide extended ICT tools, to persons with disabilities in Eastern Uganda. Just mentioned the cost of accessing, but also knowing the right tool, gadgets to access. So groups in Eastern Uganda have received ICT tools for Unwanted Witness, but also grassroots women in Rwenzori region have also we've also worked with them and provided ICT tools. We've done campaigns and continue to do campaigns around empowering communities, campaigns such as Tosirika, this it's a Luganda, it's a local dialect word that means don't keep quiet. If you feel insecure online, if you feel attacked, if you have a problem online, please speak out. Do not die alone, because we know how technology and use of the different social media platforms have isolated us from our communities. You find somebody just on phone struggling and speaking to strangers. Once you feel threatened, please speak out. But also provide tools, guidelines on where to go, who to approach, and what to do when you're in such a situation. The other campaign is Yes to Compliancy, and this speaks to enforcement of the data protection law. We know that, like Martin mentioned, a lot of data has been amassed, both in public and private institutions and entities. But the level of compliance to the data protection law is still really, really low. So in our Yes to Compliance, we urge data collectors and processors to comply, but also empower data subjects to ask critical questions of why are you collecting my data? What are you going to use it for? For how long are you storing it? But also know their rights as data subjects. In conclusion, we also provide trainings on data protection and privacy, because as you get online, we deposit a lot of word data. Some of us do not know what to do, but also as we take it there, we don't know how we don't know what questions to ask, like I mentioned. But also the collectors themselves do not know their obligations when it comes to compliance and handling of personal data. So we provided trainings and continue to train different actors, both in private sector, in government, but also in civil society, to ensure that they understand the law and comply to the Data Protection and Privacy Act. So in the nutshell, that's part of our work. I've summarized, but there's a lot, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. We have very limited time to conclude, but there's a question in the Q&A section, and I think I'll give it to Michael or Chero. The question goes, I understand government sponsorship opportunities target fresh scholars. What plan does Ministry of ICT or government have for individuals who are financially unstable with much interest in upgrading in ICT courses but are not fresh scholars? I think, they put in brackets, dropped studies 4 years ago and above.
Thank you, Bella. Now, in terms of, if we're talking about innovation, I'd like to state that it's not only limited to the youth, it's limited to businesses, it goes out to individuals, businesses. The issue there is having an idea that can be supported. Now, if we're talking of the academic area, of course, government through the Ministry of Education has its standards, regulations governing sponsorship. Maybe what I could add, the recent developments in terms of technical skilling. The Ministry of ICT supporting the Ministry of Education, developed what we call the modularized technical curriculum, where individuals can go for short periods and get a qualification which contributes to a larger qualification, if I could call it that. For instance, if you're pursuing a diploma in ICT infrastructure, you can go for a 3-month course, say laying of fiber, and get your accreditation for that 3 months program. You can then go back to employment certified, say, in laying fiber. If you like, later on, you can come back and pursue your diploma program. Say it's 2 years. After your 3 months course, you can then continue along that modularized path. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
I hope they feel satisfied with the answer. Thank you so much, Michael. In case you have any other questions, you can raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. In case you have any questions that you'd like to type in the Q&A section, please do so. I'm sharing the results from our poll question, and this is what it looks like. Most of us believe that the high costs of internet are the major factor and the biggest barrier to internet penetration in Uganda. Thank you so much for giving us your thoughts and opinions. Thank you so much for joining this conversation as well, for giving us your time and honoring this invite. We are going to have a photo, a group photo for the panelists. If you could put your video back on for a second. Thank you. Grace, are you there?
With smile?
Yes, with smile. Okay, we're done. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining this conversation. Thank you for being a part of us. We will have parting shots from each of us, just giving our concluding remarks, and we'll end this webinar. I think we'll start with Madame Dorothy.
Since I was the last person to speak. No, thank you, Bella. And I want to thank everybody on this call, the people listening in, the speakers. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your insights. And I think this opens a great opportunity for us to continue engaging on building the ICT sector that Uganda deserves. And like I said, it takes everybody. I like the insights that I've had and the work that the group of the panel is doing, the different persons on the panel are doing, including government. Thank you so much, Bella, for having us.
Lucy, then Martin.
Yes. Well, thank you from my side as well. I think what I would like to say is that as a community, I think we need to adapt our argument depending on who we are speaking to. When we are speaking to development partners, maybe an argument of human rights and digital rights can go a long way and can be aligned with their priorities. But when we are speaking to the private sector, or also I think to a large extent to government, I think we need to frame the argument differently and really try to highlight the economic gains for society, for individuals, for small businesses, and for the country as a whole that comes with increased investment in ICT infrastructure and access.
Thanks, Bella, and thanks to other panelists and other participants. UN Global Pulse is really interested in the work around data and how data can be safely and responsibly used for socio-economic development. And I'm available, and my team is available to participate in such discussions around this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Michael and close with Grace.
Thank you, Bella. I would like to say over the next few years, the ministry and in fact government is going to focus on reducing the cost of communication and we're likely to see a lot of interventions in that space. We're also going to focus on reducing the cost of devices. We are going to focus on commercializing our local applications. I would like to call upon the private sector, the public, to engage along with government to ensure we utilize some of these systems that are developed locally. As you might see, government has been the #1 user of locally developed applications. We want to see the private sector also utilize those applications. I thank you so much.
First, I think I want to thank Unwanted Witness for inviting me into this webinar. I'm really glad because I know we started partnering with Unwanted Witness last year during the Data Privacy Day. And I believe that even this webinar is part of that forging partnership, strengthening the partnership. And I'm really glad that you have invited me, and great to see you, Dorothy, and the rest of the team. So just maybe my call to action is, you know, as civil society, I think we should never get tired of pushing for engagement with those who make policies, with the authorities, and also insisting on public participation, because it has helped a lot, and in places where it is successful. And also to remember that as we even push for an ICT sector that we think is ideal, that we should remember that there are certain pillars that must be seen to underpin that. And one of them, of course, is digital skills and literacy, and of course, you know, digital infrastructure. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this conversation. We have the private symposium happening in Mauritius, and we can't wait to also host you there. We can't wait to engage and share with you on that conversation that will be happening as well. We will share the details on our social media platforms, which is Unwanted Witness Uganda on all platforms, and Unwanted Witness. But also our hashtag is UG Invest in ICT. In case you have any takeaways from this conversation, please be sure to tag Unwanted Witness as well. Thank you so much for coming. Have a blessed afternoon.
Goodbye.
Bye.